Let's go here, and if someone wants to read the rest of this chapter, we'll discuss that. So 44 through 49.
In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of the mountain, but not by human hands. A rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed David in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court.
All right, thank you. So as we see here, this is where there's there, of course, as you can imagine, some debate. We have the rock here, the God of heaven, forever, stone rock. The debate is not that that's God coming and crushing these kingdoms, or that rock depicting who God is. The debate that we'll sometimes see is what exactly is the kingdom that's being set up. Some, of course, point to the final kingdom upon from more of a eschatological in the time viewpoint. Some people take this as being a piece of apocalyptic literature, which it is, but apocalyptic literature can either be within centuries, or it can be up until again the end of time. And so that's just I'm just curious what your guys' thought is whenever you see this in verse 44. What is he pointing to? What is the author trying to point to here? Again, be in mind that these are not 21st century Western Christians. These are people who are existing in an exile under Babylonian rule. And so when they first read this, and the author who's writing this well, the author was probably under Persian rule when this happened, but what was he trying to depict to these people? What was he trying to describe to them through this? Because we can take it, and I'm not against us taking and saying, yes, this is God establishing his kingdom forever in Jerusalem and all will be well. I'm not arguing against that. But what do you think these guys were thinking during that time when they were reading this? What was coming to them?
These guys being
the people who are reading this. The first group of people who had either heard it or read it.
Well, I think it could probably be the millennium. Well, yes, Christ is the millennium.
Okay, so this is pointing toward messianic.
Yeah.
Christ coming. Okay.
Well, I'm poisoned because I'm really expressing what I see into it rather than what I think they see into it.
Right. No, I understand. That's why that's the hard part, right? We can
those two.
Try to put our viewpoint in from several thousand years later.
We're looking at it from that standpoint.
Right.
They're looking at it as a prophecy.
Okay.
And a lot of times, prophecies, current prophets sometimes will be very discreet on the 27th of this.
Yeah.
And then it comes and goes. But in the Old Testament, a lot of the prophecies to me are provoked. They provoke the kind of questions that we're asking. But at the time, those people, I think, were more receptive to that type of prophecy. And there are probably different groups of people that interpreted it differently.
Over the years, over the centuries, I think.
We have more information, so we can say, well, it's probably this.
Yeah.
But,
right.
They're just looking to be delivered from Babylon.
That's part of it too. I think there is that piece of it. There's a thread of hope that runs through this too. That
I think that they
Go
were
ahead.
thinking they would receive justification. I think that they were thinking the same thing that the disciples were was crucified. He was there to be an earthly king, to actually take a seat as a Nebuchadnezzar over an earthly kingdom. They didn't understand Jesus was going to be coming in to foster a spiritual kingdom first.
Okay.
They probably were looking at it like they were God's chosen people.
Mm-hmm.
God was going to come and be the ruler over the earth, and they were going to get a special place in it.
So there, it's a messianic perspective to them.
Justification.
Yeah.
Be justified.
Okay.
But for a king who would deliver them
Mhm.
from oppression, earthly oppression.
Is that's yeah,
Is that what you're
absolutely,
saying?
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we're all heading in the same direction there. Anything from this side of the room? Thoughts?
It amazes me how preoccupied the people then and the people today are with kingdoms of earth. It's like that's all they can comprehend is just earthly kingdoms, and they can't
Mhm.
get past that.
Mhm.
And they're just looking for relief. They're looking for a place where they're not going to be subjugated, but where they're going to find relief. And I don't think they even have the concept that it's God. I think
Okay.
they just have the concept that it's, their hope is in a kingdom that's going to just relieve us of the oppression that we're under.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of what they're looking at too. They're not. I think there's a messianic point. I think there's an eschatological point, but I also think we just want to get out of this. Is there any relief in the future
Yeah.
that we can get out of this as well? And this God, our God, who we believe in, who we've disobeyed, and now we're in this situation because of this. The stone that you see there in verse 45 kind of is, some people would say, of course, it is Mount Zion. It's not explicit to it, but there are people who say that mountain is Mount Zion, and with Jerusalem and everything is built upon that, and that's what we have, and all the world empires will fall around that, is one take of what you see there in verse 45.
Well,
Go ahead. Yes, Bob.
I'm still kind of thinking like, a lot of our understanding of prophecies is prophecy foretold or foretold.
Right.
We see the completion.
Right.
The book of Revelation is not completed. We know what's gonna, we've been told what to do, and we've been told how it'll come about, but it's in very obscure ways that we can interpret different things. Well, this is obviously a sign that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's kind of the way I think they saw this. They probably didn't, they were looking forward to the conclusion,
Yeah.
like we look forward to the second coming,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't, it didn't happen in their lifetimes.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the point. Yeah.
That didn't happen in their lifetime. Yeah.
It's hope for possibly their children or
Mhm.
Yeah.
other generations.
Future generations.
Future, but
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a key part of that too.
They weren't necessarily fond of the prophets anyway, because anytime a prophet showed up, it was always, it's doom and, that's exactly right, it's doom and
Yeah,
gloom,
most of the time it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, probably the glaring instance of a prophet actually having a profound effect would have been Jonah, and that wasn't even with Israelites, it was with, the Ninevites. So
Right. Right.
Not even believers. They're like, oh, wow, this is amazing.
He didn't want to deliver the message. Like, there's hope, but I
Yeah.
really don't want to
I
tell
don't
you.
wanna tell you
I
what
don't
it
think you
is.
deserve it.
Yeah.
And I smell like the inside of a fish
yeah,
right now.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's not a good day
So,
for me at all.
It's been a bad day.
Yeah.
That's true. No, I can see that too. Yeah, I think you guys are hitting it on the head when it comes to the idea of hope and them looking for relief from the oppression. Let's look at the last 4 verses here with what King Nebuchadnezzar does. It's almost like he kind of gets it, but yet he tries to, first of all, he starts worshiping Daniel almost. Some people would say that's what he's doing. Others is he's in awe and not sure what to do at this point, but it almost looks like he's worshiping him there in verse 46.
Buying influence.
What's that?
He's buying influence.
Buying influence. What do you mean by that?
He's got access to God through David.
Oh, okay. Now I have it's one more way. It's like one more way to another powerful God.
Or maybe he even sees Daniel as a spiritual being or as like a form of a god. If Nebuchadnezzar thinks himself as a god, and now suddenly someone else who is a human can interpret his dream,
Mm-hmm.
not just kind of interpret his dream, but nail it on the head.
Right. Well,
You know,
And not just interpret it, but like tell him what it was.
right.
yeah, everything about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's probably like, oh, I could tread lightly because, this guy might have more power than.
Yeah, no, I think that's a key part of it. I think he forgets that Daniel's God is the one who provided the message, the mystery. We talked about that last week. Provided the insight and the revelation that Daniel on his own cannot do. So King Nebuchadnezzar forgets that at this point. And then there is a response. So he first of all, he bows there in 46, and then he responds to what Daniel said. And he said, your God is a God of gods. So he does not become a monotheist at this point, but he does realize that this is a more powerful God. And Lord of Kings and Revealer of Mysteries. The mysteries, again, is that revelation that we talked about last week. And this is the first time that Nebuchadnezzar refers to it as a mystery. This revelation that only a God such as your God could be able to
What does the Lord
provide.
mean? Lord of Kings.
I don't have that.
That's what mine says.
Truly, your God is God of gods and the Lord of kings.
The NIV says.
Yeah. Because we refer to Christ as the Lord.
It's in verse 47.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see if I have it in this one. Based on,
Is that like, it's like a position higher than king?
well, the way it looks like here, yeah, what I have here is that it's just another way of saying, you could have said God of gods and God of kings.
So I've got a little
What do you have?
cue that's taking me to Deuteronomy 10:17
Mm-hmm.
or Psalms 136, 2 through 3.
Deuteronomy 10, what?
10:17.
Yep, there it is. For the Lord your God is God of gods, the Lord.
Yeah, I would take it as for the Lord your God. Well, that's different though. Like I said a second ago, I thought it would be God of the Lords, or instead of Lord of Lords, God of Lords. But
You could say
the
King of
usage is
Kings,
incorrect.
but
Yeah.
It says Lord, at least in the NIV, and that's what I was wondering because.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think there's two different distinctions here.
Okay.
First of all, you have the society he's in. They have 50,000 gods.
Yep.
Okay, so the first statement is God is a God of all gods. He even supersedes their gods.
Right.
Also, the next statement is Lord of Kings. Well, he realizes that God is Lord over him at this particular time, over the kings, because that's what the dream was all about, a king.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord's oversight of kings. So I think there's two things here. Yes, he's God over their gods. He's also Lord over kings.
And Daniel's already established that King Nebuchadnezzar is the King of Kings because God has made him
The King of Kings,
That's
yeah.
how he started off. You're
So
the King
Lord
of
is
So
Kings.
you're saying Lord is above the king, yeah.
Because God has given you that.
Yeah.
So now King Nebuchadnezzar, is he realize if he's about to get knocked down,
Yeah.
right? And you would think the interpretation is true since the actual dream was described to him without him telling it, then if he's the King of Kings as a man who couldn't interpret it, then what is the God who's going to knock down this?
Right. I can go with that. Any other thoughts on that one? I think that's I like that.
More than just a ruling status, a divine nature.
So, of a divine nature, but above, yeah.
Maybe not a God, but a divinity.
A higher divinity. Okay. What's one thing, as we read through here, what is one thing that Daniel does not do, which has led to a lot of conversation? So Daniel tells the interpretation, the king bows to him, gives homage to him, and then he talks of him being the God as a God of gods and the Lord of kings. What does Daniel do?
He thanks Shadrach, Meshach. He takes the appointment and then appoints Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Before that point. So he doesn't. There's something that he does not do that has caused many people would
tell him to stop worshiping him.
Right. He doesn't say anything to the king. He kind of lets it happen.
Yeah.
And some people say that's why he was thrown in the lion's den later as a form of punishment. You can take that as you want to, but that's what some people would take it that way. I know there's more to it than that story, but they're like, oh well, later on he was punished for not telling Nebuchadnezzar not to worship him. But yeah, it's just kind of odd that he didn't say anything. And then maybe others would say, well, the author just didn't put his response in, or
like
maybe he was afraid to say something.
A big honor or something like that.
And you're just like,
and he just sits there and smiles.
Like,
thank you.
Yeah.
And you say, why don't you
right.
give credit to
Yeah.
I'm trying to think back when Joseph interpreted dreams. Did he say like, okay, but to avoid all this is how he just interpreted the dream?
Yeah, but then he bestowed a super duper honor on it.
Right.
Right, but
right.
he did that to Daniel too, right? He did that to Joseph.
He does. Yeah, it's just yeah.
They interpret the dream, but they don't say, now if you want to avoid this happening. I don't think it's for them to say if you want to avoid this happening.
No, the argument is that he doesn't keep the king from worshiping him.
Yeah.
That's the argument. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we don't understand court protocol back then. Maybe
Good point.
they just didn't put
Yeah.
in all that went with that.
Yeah. No, that actually is a comment that comes across, is that maybe they just didn't put his response.
I think Daniel just didn't want to say or do anything that might anger the king, because even though he interpreted the dream to save his life, not to gain power. And so he's just going to let the king think what the king thinks and do what the king does. He's not going to disagree with him.
Right.
He's just over there going,
yeah. You're not killing me now.
My teeth, I'm just going to keep my mouth shut, let the king say and do what he wants to.
Yeah. No, no doubt about that. You wonder sometimes how long it took for him to be promoted. Was it instant? Was it, a week later or something like that? Sometimes, it just doesn't say, but you just wonder if that was an immediate promotion there. But he gets an extreme promotion, and so do his three friends based on his request.
I would say that maybe in times of enslavement, God allowed the Israelites to plunder the Egyptians as they left. He allowed Solomon to gain riches. He does give favor. He didn't prohibit Daniel from accepting the gifts. I'm not sure if it said it worshipped him. It's who gave homage to him.
Yeah, I was getting asked, mine just says it fell prostrate.
But he did
It
acknowledge,
didn't mention
the
worship.
superiority of Daniel's God and acknowledged where the authority was coming from.
This could have been just like a huge relief, all this anxiety he had.
Right.
Then he heard it, there was this
Yeah.
relief, and he just collapsed,
Well, the reason I say that is the word that he uses there, if it's different here. This one says bowed down with his face to the ground. It's the same usage that we're going to see. Where is it? In 3:3. Let's see. No, make sure I'm there. No, it's where they talk about the pipes. Okay, 3:5. When you hear the sound of the horn, hymn, and all the music, you must bow down and pay homage to the golden statue of King Nebuchadnezzar. The usage there is in Hebrew is a worship type word. Now you're right. Is it a divine worship or is it a relief? The way I took it was a worship. He worshipped him as if he was some type of divine being, just based on how it's used here and how I've seen it used in other areas.
Now,
Go ahead.
verse 24 earlier, they talk about, he makes it, he says, no, I'm going to tell you what this dream means, but don't destroy the wise men.
Mm-hmm.
So did that happen?
Did he kill him?
Yeah.
Not
I mean,
that I said.
he saved Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but those wise men were still around?
As far as I know,
Yeah.
there's no indication that he
Okay.
killed off all those guys. And there's some conversation there in chapter 3 about the very wise men that he saved are now coming after the 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's part of.
You know, I think Daniel also knew that Nebuchadnezzar was a very strong-willed. He knew his personality. It doesn't reveal it here, but you know, in the 3rd chapter, Nebuchadnezzar turns around and makes this golden image.
Yeah, the next
Which
thing.
is, after he went through with this with Israel's God, then he turns around and makes a God of his own.
Well, he's impetuous.
So, yeah, he's impetuous. That's
Yeah.
the word.
Impulsive,
Not
yeah.
a good learning.
A little bit of excessive, yeah. Well, the way he promotes Daniel here and all that is pretty excessive and impulsive, and yeah, and he
It
just
could have been
continues
important
that.
for Daniel to be alive to give hope for his countrymen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that may have been part of why he didn't stop him. Because if he stopped him from worshiping, being worshipped, he might have been in trouble.
He didn't
It could have gone the other way for the people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Any other thoughts on chapter 2 before we jump into chapter 3?
Just a strange thought.
Oh, good.
God appoints government people,
Mhm.
magistrates, presidents, whatever. And you just wonder sometimes, how in the world does he promote some of these folks?
I know.
This guy Nebuchadnezzar, I mean, he was worse than Hitler, Genghis Khan. I mean, this guy was a murderer. He killed everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how does God in his righteousness promote somebody like that? I just get confused at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's one of those things where it hasn't been, that mystery has not been revealed to us why he does that, you know, kind of that part of it. I don't think we'll ever have an answer at least this side of heaven. So
I can think of a number of politicians that I wonder
I got a
how they
few
got.
local ones right now, right?
how they got to this point, right? I don't know. There's so many more. It's so much more complex, I think, than we know.
And we're assuming that free will exists in those times also, and that it may not be God doing all that. It may be God's foreknowledge
Uh-huh.
of this, is looking down and saying, then he went and built a bunch of idols,
Right.
you know, and it's not that God told him to do that, it's
Right.
that he decided to do that. And he had the information, at least the prophecy, that he shouldn't do that, but he did it anyway.
So God placed him there, but through his own will and
Yeah.
abilities, he's made a lot of bad decisions along the way.
Right, he
and
made
just kind of blew
those,
up.
God didn't control every action, he did,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah. That's how I look at it. How does everyone else look at that? Once you say Nebuchadnezzar, who's put in place, well, we do see God's hand through this, through some of the prophecy and through some of the story here, as well as we go further back into some of the other prophets. Once a king is in place, is it free reign at that point for the king, like free will, where he just either makes
No.
the leader, he or she makes either her own decisions, or is God?
I don't know, so the
He's
verse
allowing-
that
is he
says
allowing it?
God
Right.
allows it, and then
Mhm.
what does he say? But you took it too far. I allowed you to punish
okay.
the Israel, but you took it too far.
Who did he say that to? That was to the That was way back.
Edomites, wasn't it?
Is the Canaanites? Was yeah.
But he said it, we just studied this in Sunday school, so he just said it to, was it with Nehemiah? Or was it right before?
No, it wasn't in Nehemiah.
But I'm just, there's other examples where God said, I let you,
Yeah, and you've
but
taken
then
it
you
too far.
took it too far, so now I'm coming back in.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna,
Yeah.
take control of this, so that not, and it was with also the Canaanites. So there's maybe more than one example in the Bible
Mhm.
where God says, I gave this to you, but you went too far.
And you say that to Edomites, and they lived just
Yeah.
east of
Esau's,
Jerusalem, and whenever Nebuchadnezzar was burning Jerusalem to the ground, they were sort of over there kind of doing
Laughing.
some additional pilfering. And
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are points where that happens too. Yeah.
So I see where God acknowledges, like, I gave this to you,
And then you went
But-
too far.
I,
you went too far.
kind of techie, I was looking into some stuff about like quantum computers and looking at probabilities and the chance of occurrences and stuff and making predictions about that.
Yeah.
And each choice you do, you can take a different path, but if you follow the chain, any choice that you make, there's going to be an equal opposite reaction. In a turn or two, it tends to still end up at the same destination. So it's like there's a expansion and a contraction. So the idea of free will is more an effect of the person than the person affecting their environment would be. So it's like your choices really only affect you to a certain extent, other than changing your environment.
Well, if
Oh,
everybody
that's
in this
interesting.
room is like me, and I suspect you are, you were sinners.
Right.
Or are sinners, and you were sinners, and then you accepted Christ,
Mm-hmm.
and then you sinned again.
Yep,
And so that's the free will I'm talking about. We have a defined path out of that, and we have a commitment and obligations to fulfill. But here, he's just doing what men do, men being mankind.
Yeah. Human
You can say
contact.
men, it's fine.
In this
At that point,
room, I can't.
in that case, you can. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well,
I
it's fine,
see.
yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe you were thinking of a different
All right. Let's.
person kind.
She was fully content to let you bury
I'm
yourself.
78 years old. Okay, give me a break.
Let's jump into chapter 3, because why not? That's so. We started with chapter 1, where we saw how God can bless those who are faithful, even when they're in trouble. And then in 2 was God has the capacity to know all things, or to be able to, reveal mysteries, including those who do not, or pagans, even the dreams of a pagan king. And then here in chapter 3, we'll see again how God protects those who are faithful to him. Even again, whenever you're dealing with a pagan nation and a pagan king, where God is still part of that. So I mean, the oppression continues as we go into chapter 3. This is a very familiar story that we're very familiar
One of
with.
my favorites.
It is good. It's good. There's let me jump to that. Yeah, jump over to that slide real quick. There's a great Greek Orthodox prayer or hymn. Oops. So here's a depiction. It's a Greek Orthodox painting, lack of a better word, and it's the three in the lion's den with the angel. At least this is their interpretation. But this is a song that they sing, the Greek Orthodox sing, related to what they refer to as the three youths in the fiery furnace. This was written probably in the 17th century. I could easily see us singing this song every Sunday. I'll mention it to Hugh next time I see him and see how that goes. But anyways, it's just if you want to read through that. Can everyone see that? Okay. I mean, I'm going to read it too, just so we can all kind of see it. An image made with hands you would not worship, O thrice blessed three. I don't think we use thrice enough nowadays. But protected by the ineffable essence, you were glorified by your ordeal by fire. From the midst of the devouring flames, you called upon God, crying, "Hasten, O compassionate one. In mercy, come to our aid. For if you will, you can." What's the? For me, there's a line that was just, it all made sense. Was there something in there that just kind of caught your eye or caught your attention when you see that?
If you will, you can.
If you will, you can, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that kind of how it is?
I would kind of maybe do a little juxtaposition.
We should call this guy up, right, and say, "Hey, will you rewrite this?" We'll get Watermark or Bethel to come and rewrite it, and they'll do it. But yeah, it's just.
I think that will is a different one. Yeah.
For if you will.
If you
can.
so desire, you can.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah. That's the one that caught me too. Is, we could all get thrown into our own version of a fiery furnace, and when God is ready, He can pull us out, or
Well, that was
He
part
may not.
that was part of that study. That was the first Daniel, that lesson that we had
Mhm.
and one of the points was Meshach, Abednego, Shadrach. They said, and even if he doesn't
Yep.
rescue us,
right.
we still won't bow to this
Mhm.
statue.
Yeah. Can you imagine what that takes to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's just unbelievable to have that level of conviction. All right, let's start reading a little bit into here 3, because I know you guys know this story very well, and I want to hear, of course, your take on some of this, but obviously, but there's some additional details that I think would be very interesting for us to talk about here. This is I would say this is probably one of the chapters that the author really adds a lot of extra details to kind of show the excessiveness of Nebuchadnezzar, as well as his not only his excessiveness of material things, but also his excessiveness of fear and concern that his gods are not powerful enough, and that he's not that powerful when it's all said and done.
Isn't that why they had so many gods? Because none of them really ever did it. Well, obviously, none of them did anything, so they would create another.
Let's have another one. Yeah, let's see if this
And
god.
another one. Let's
Yeah.
do another one.
Right.
Another one.
And then they get a god that actually looks like he's going to do something, and then they raise that one up, and all of a sudden you have hundreds of gods. Let's see here. First of all, let's just talk about this. So I'm just going to read verse 1, and we'll talk about this a little bit. Nebuchadnezzar the king, and they don't tell us how, one day Daniel and his friends are now really powerful people, and then the next day he makes this statue. It could have been years down the road. Maybe you guys see in your notes the amount of time. I didn't find it, but if you guys do, let me know. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, the height of which was 60 cubits, and its width 6 cubits. He set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So it's kind of a stick in the eye of God. Is how I looked at this. We just had.
Say what the idol was.
I know it doesn't really describe what it is, does it? There's
it looked a little like that one we were looking at before.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
There's
Did
debate about
you
it.
Make your worst nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like he
Like-
created what he'd
Yeah.
been told not to.
It caused him to lose all this sleep. It drove him mad. All this stuff. And did you turn around and create it? in gold?
Well, think
How
about
big
it.
is 60 cubits? What is
90 feet? Is that?
So it's like 8 stories tall. I mean, this is no small.
Yeah, there's some symbolism to it. Let me see if I remember how that broke down.
9 feet wide.
90 feet tall, 9 feet wide. So it's,
Oh, 9 feet wide.
yeah, so it's really kind of odd. So if you're an engineer, you're probably like, how's that going to really work?
Oh, yeah,
That's
but
what I
it's
was
6.
thinking.
Like a what?
Just a-
Obelisk.
Okay, so no, I thought it said 6. Height was 60 cubits.
But you got to think, in chapter 3, he said, "You're the head of gold," and now he makes this 90-foot tall some would say solid gold statue, others would say it's
Yeah.
but so what I found, I did a little bit of digging into this.
Show us a picture.
I don't have a picture. Some people want
2001 Space Odyssey. Remember
uh-huh.
the monkeys were
Yeah. Oh yeah.
jumping around there.
Yeah.
That was a
Maybe that's-
novelist.
Yeah, that could have been it. Some people say that the gold that he used was the 100,000 talents that David had used to build the temple. That then, of course, he stole and took all that gold with him, which would be $40 billion in today's dollars.
So he stole from God and then made a god, made a false idol out of it.
So it didn't happen overnight.
Oh, imagine it took at least a couple of weeks. Yeah. So, but you have this huge thing, and the plain of Dura. There's a lot of debate about exactly where that location is. Some would say it's right outside the city walls of Babylon, but there's just discussion about what that is. Obviously, it's a pretty large space because of the amount of people that are called to look at that.
Got an interesting footnote here. It
Yeah.
says, Nebuchadnezzar probably decked the entire thing in gold to negate the message conveyed by the statue in his dream, where only the head was gold,
Mm-hmm.
and signaled that the Babylonian Empire would only be temporary.
Yep. Yeah, that's in chapter 3 it says you're just the head, and now he's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll be everything. Yep.
Yeah, but he's still disobedient.
Yeah, it's still bad. Yeah.
This is like the worst game of rock, scissors, paper ever.
Yeah, like I'll show you.
Iron,
Yeah.
gold,
It
Yeah.
also said
rock from God.
there was a revolt against him 10 years into his reign, and this loyalty test could have been after the revolt.
Mhm. Yeah, I've seen some talk. Let's go into that. Let's talk about that a little bit more. So as we go into 2 and 3. So the Nebuchadnezzar, the king, sent word to assemble the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Just imagine the amount of people that are starting to show up, and about how they have all these titles. And so again, it's kind of, well, the satraps weren't doing their jobs. Let's bring in the governors. Let's bring in all these other people. Then the
Congress.
yeah. Then the satraps, the prefects,
Do the same thing.
Puffing around.
Yeah.
yeah, and the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, the magistrates, and all the rulers of the provinces were assembled for the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. A lot of repetition here. Why do you think there's repetition? Look what the author is doing in these two verses.
I call it style writing because that occurs often, it seems like.
He's trying to make a point, right?
Yeah.
So what point do you think the author is trying to make here with this repetition?
That this was really a Nebuchadnezzar focused on kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's all about him.
Right.
And it's also how powerful he thinks he is with all these overloaded list of officials and government people showing up. All the bureaucrats are now here to come in and worship this the statue. Also, one thing we want to think about here is Nebuchadnezzar, being as crazy as he was, it wasn't just about his power as the state, it was also control of the religion. So when you have an authoritarian ruler, you have the control, you want not just the control of the state and the treasury and everything related to that, but you also want the control of the religion. So everything is under your power, so claiming absolute authority over the entire civilization. When Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges God or gods, he doesn't acknowledge them because they're gods, as in their own right. He acknowledges them because they're gods that he believes would be under his own power and his own influence. Also, this idea of if you claim absolute authority within a civilization over religion and everything with the state, you're able to then kind of make the rules of the religion. And that's something, of course, that happened in the early 20th century with our friend not our friend, but with Hitler and the Nazis. And there's a quote that I found by Herr von Schirach. He's the guy on the far right here. That's Hitler on the far left. This guy's on the far right. He was a Nazi Party national youth leader. But he made this quote in 1936. The font's a little small. I'll read it. But one cannot be a good German and at the same time deny God, but an arousal of faith in the eternal German is at the same time an arousal of faith in the eternal God. If we act as true Germans, we act according to the laws of God. Whosoever serves Adolf Hitler, the Führer serves Germany, and whoever serves Germany serves God. That is the viewpoint that Nebuchadnezzar was coming from. But how perverse is that? If you really think about what was trying to go on there, and if I know some of you guys have studied a lot about World War II and that time period, and I have too, and it was. I mean, that's what they were trying to do with especially with the Lutheran Church during that time, is bring the Lutheran Church into the state. That's why Bonhoeffer was so powerful and influential, and eventually killed because of what he tried to do during that time period. But any thoughts or concerns, or see how that kind of parallels what Nebuchadnezzar's trying to do here?
Like they tried to kind of weave God into their own earthly desires.
Yeah. It's their God, and they're going to control their God, but their God is powerful, and so we're powerful, and we're going to all, yeah. And it's almost like it's very dualistic. Only if you can only believe in God, or you can only be a good German if you believe in our God, or you believe in God. They're not using our God, in God. So they're taking the overall creator God and saying true Germans act according to the laws of God. And what they're trying to set apart, of course, is that if you're not a true German, of course what they would do is they would go and kill you. And the same thing would happen with Nebuchadnezzar. If you don't bow to this statue, you're not a true Babylonian, and so we're going to kill you. And that's what our three friends are about to face with when they don't bow down to that image. The more I study what happened with World War II and with Hitler and how he tried to influence the Lutheran Church and everything related to that, I just see a lot of parallels with oppressive dictators and their tie-in with the state and religion, and with a lot of what we see in with Nebuchadnezzar here, but in also other Old Testament texts, and how they try to pull all that power in together with themselves, for themselves, actually.
Just a quick statement.
Yes, sir.
God manipulates men.
Okay.
In this case, men is trying to manipulate God.
Right. They're trying to take over. They're trying to become divine themselves, right? Or I mean, I don't know if that's as far, but they're trying to. I agree. Manipulate God and how people focus on God.
Yeah, it wasn't just religion. It was also, all the books he burned, text, and all the art he stole. He was trying to just wipe everyone's creed. He was going to rewrite the history of the world as he saw fit as well, too. So.
Right. If you look back to what in chapter 1 here, what was Nebuchadnezzar trying to do to the Jewish people? He was trying to destroy them.
Destroyed their art, he
Indoctrinate
destroyed
them.
their temples, he destroyed
ISIS.
their history.
Yeah, that's another good point. ISIS is another view.
Still there.
But then brainwash them with his language and his view of the arts and
Even
math,
the way they eat.
astrology.
Well, even in his book, Mein Kampf, he talks about you have a better reaction when you tell the bigger the lie, the more it is, and you just keep repeating it, the better, the more likely people are to believe it over time. So you come up with the biggest whopper, and you just keep repeating it as if it's true.
And this particular idol had fanfare,
When the legend
music,
becomes fact, print the legend.
and so you talk about a bigger lie, it was a whole
Big
concert.
band.
There was a whole zither playing there. Do you have a picture of a zither for us?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Maybe you could.
When you talk to Hugh about that
Maybe
song,
next time. Yeah.
could you ask him what a trigon is? I have.
I will. Where did you see that one?
Well, it's.
Oh, trigon. Yeah, there it is.
Lyre, trigon, harp, bagpipe.
It's not zither. Not
Is
a,
that zither what it
Yeah,
says in yours?
zither, hornflute,
Okay,
zither,
so now I
lyre,
know. I don't have to ask you.
yeah.
all kinds of.
What's a zither?
T-O-I-G-O-N.
No.
It's a triangular lyre,
Well, it's sort of like.
or a type of harp. Yeah, there you go.
Bob, I think it's similar to one of those instruments like where
And the hillbilly.
you can blow it,
Oh.
and then at the same time you're doing that, you're banging your knees together because you got cymbals, and then, you
Like a kazoo, one-man
Yeah,
band.
they had sound fear back then too.
Who could deny a God with that kind of musical
I
genius
know.
behind
Well,
it?
there's some interesting parts to that. Let's look at that. Let's see here. Actually, let's talk about the people who show up first. So there in verse 3, count the amount of people who show up to this. So we have the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the judges, and the magistrates.
and all the other.
Right, but we get what? We get 7.
Those in order of importance. So do you want to be a satrap over a prefect?
Yeah, my footnote says we don't know what all the positions are, but they are in order of importance.
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
So the satrap is when Daniel became a satrap, right?
He made him like
Nehemiah was?
ruler of. He put him in a high position and made him ruler of the entire province of Babylon,
So he's a chief prefect, so he's number 2.
and placed him
Okay.
in charge of
Yeah.
all of its wise men. And that seems higher than a satrap.
My only experience is that in my favorite movie, Casablanca, they had to get the prefect to sign the order
Oh, yeah.
to get you through all the
Yeah, that's
all
true.
the mismatches.
That's true.
Whoever the prefect was, and that.
I got the treasurers are right under the judges. I'm like, yeah, that's still there like that today.
You think like that? The treasurers, the judges?
I think, yeah, I think, yeah, one pays for the, yeah.
So some would take this as some symbolism. Not the, and all the rulers of the provinces, but the 7 official groups named before that, being 7. Some people have taken that as the entirety of this, the population, the Babylonian population were there. So not only these officials, but everyone else too came. Take that as you will, but that was I saw a couple, when I was doing some additional reading on this, saw some people who would take it as that way, that the author is trying to provide some symbolism, just kind of showing the amount of people who this covered. It wasn't just Babylonians, but it was all the other people they had conquered.
Well, these
as
are
well.
the people on the org chart, on the Mandasharial org chart.
Right. But it's, expanding beyond.
These were the
That too.
important people.
Right.
It's like the house of. It's like the what do you call it? The State of the Union, where you get all the people in.
Wasn't
one
that
big
fun
house.
this year? I
Yeah.
just really,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're there because it's puffery and you need to be there, and you get a little more attention if you don't go. But it's nothing to do with the issue at hand.
Right. Yeah, it's a big show. Just a big show.
I bet no one tore his speech up.
Probably not. Probably not. That was, wow.
Nebuchadnezzar was a socialist then, right? If everyone worked for the government.
I don't think he'd probably say more of a communist or a despot.
More dictator.
We're going way off task, but
Yeah.
We're having fun though, aren't we?
yeah, no, it's great.
You brought the Nazis into it.
Well, it's true. We talked about Nehemiah this last week. I was going to say Nehemiah was a governor, so where does that put him on this org chart? 3 down. So
Seems to
Just
me
give you
like
a point of reference.
Nebuchadnezzar had a little bit of an identity crisis there because he wanted to be the most powerful. He considered himself the most powerful, but he was confused about his own identity. So he gave it to Daniel for a moment, and then he realized what he did. He's like, oh no, I gotta take it back. And so he makes his own, and he's like back and forth out of confusion because he doesn't really understand who he is.
I think that, yeah. Well, there's a lot of that because he'll
wants
just
to be
give
the
stuff
most
away.
powerful, but-
Yeah. Then he has all these people.
There are times that he realizes he's not, but then he tries to grab it back by building a bigger statue that he created.
Right.
He didn't create the one in the dreams, so
Right.
he didn't have power over that one.
Right.
So he had to create one he had power over
Yeah.
to make
No.
him more important.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. What about the symbolism of this being just showing all his? It just all these people showing up shows his ultimate power and rule, or at least what his perception of all his ultimate
If it was
rulingness of
all
the people.
of the people, why didn't Daniel end up in the furnace?
So some people say he left. I've read some commentaries on that he kind of skipped town and didn't show up for this event. I'm just saying that, you know, some people have all their sort of theories. What do you have?
Out that way.
What's that?
I hear that
Just never went out there. I've got things to do.
I'm good. I'm good. I got a memo to write.
Right.
Yeah.
Says that he stayed in the king's court, but why was he allowed to stay in the king's court? I think Nebuchadnezzar would probably be embarrassed to show
Right.
a statue that
Yeah.
was kind of mocking the
Yeah.
description that Daniel had given him.
I don't know. It's I saw a couple people debating that one. Let's see, verse 4. Let's go. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "To you the command is given, O people, nations, and men of every language." Okay, you guys know what he's referring to here, right? Go back to Genesis.
To Babel,
Babel, the Tower of Babel. What happened to the Tower of Babel?
fell, the people scattered, and they
Scattered. And what's happening here?
all
They're all coming back.
Uniting 'em.
They're all coming back. That's one take of it, but that's just showing that all these people from all over are now coming back, and everyone is required to do it. So those who had now been dispersed back in Genesis, now all are to come back. And hear all these wonderful instruments, most of them which are not Jewish, and some didn't even really exist during the Babylonian, but more of the Persian. Some of them are actually Persian instruments. I think the only one, and you guys may have this in your notes, the only one that was actually a Jewish instrument was the horn, or a variation of the horn. You notice that verses 5 and 7 repeat themselves. Yeah, that's what my note says. All the instruments but one, the horn, are not found anywhere else in the Hebrew Bible. Some would say they're loan words from the Persians and from the Greeks for these other instruments. So right now, go ahead and go through all the scripture that you can possibly remember and see if you ever heard of a bagpipe in another piece of scripture. I think a bagpipe may also be a whistle. I saw some people interpret that as some sort of whistle, a kazoo type thing.
Or they have these flutes that are, you can play on in bladder or make
Yeah.
music somehow, you know.
Yeah. So he does that in 5, and then they pretty much repeat the same thing in 7. So he brings 4 and 5, and then 7 repeat, for the most part, repeats what's going on here, where you have all the instruments that are having to play. Everyone's supposed to worship the golden image. From every language is supposed to come and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar has set up. But we don't want to skip verse 6.
Yeah.
We'll go back there. But before we do, there's a contrast. Some people says there's a contrast here of the instruments that you see here, that it's almost chaotic. The type of instruments that are brought here together is not a good orchestra or band or however you want to call it, and it's probably sounded very chaotic. And maybe the author did that intentionally to kind of show that their view of Nebuchadnezzar and the whole Babylonian oppression. But if you want to compare that to the collection of instruments, or what 1 Chronicles 15:16 says, which is much more, if I remember right, 1 Chronicles 15:16. David spoke to the chiefs of the Levites to appoint their relatives, the singers with instruments of music, harps, lyres, loud-sounding cymbals, to raise sounds of joy. So you could probably contrast what David was witnessing and living through, of more sort of a true worship type music to God, to this more chaotic experience of these instruments that you see here that the author lists.
And the walls of Jericho came down, was it, it was yelling, but was it horns?
Yeah,
Yelling.
it was horns.
Horns, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or, kazoos, I think.
Nobody
Those horns.
fluted it down.
No. Is that how the song goes?
Trumpet blast.
It's a trumpet blast.
Yeah.
Is this what they use to accompany their worship?
Which this?
All these.
See, I think what the author is doing here, based on what I've been seeing, is that this is a mixture of instruments to make it sound like this kind of chaotic experience, not a real worship experience, like what I was reading in Chronicles, where that felt like a real worship experience, kind of like what we're kind of used to. This was more of a kind of a
Sort of something thrown together.
unfortunate grouping, of instruments that probably sounded really bad. And I think that's what the author is trying to depict here.
It's kind of the Elvis Presley syndrome, a whole lot of money but not much taste. So they threw a lot of money at it.
Okay,
Well, taste is kind of
it's relative.
Opinion.
what you think is good taste, bad taste. I
Right.
went to a Messianic Jewish church down in Freeport on the beach there one time, and they had it was a Christian message, but it was Messianic. But they had people running around the auditorium with streamers and stuff like that, and they were playing the shofar, and it was kind of unusual. And I see similar things in El Salvador and in Ecuador and in Mexico to some degrees, where they have a lot of different types of music that we're not comfortable with. And I won't call it bad taste, because it's their style of worship, but it's in all those cases it's basically a Christian worship, and
Right.
in some ways it's more relevant to the ancient Jewish people than we are, because we
Right.
But
No,
we
I
should bring the hymns back.
I agree, but I see your point. But I think again, what the author is trying to say is this was not a nice sounding experience. It was not a
No.
good worshipful experience. Well, let's go back to verse 6 here. We get a preview of what our three friends are about to face, and we also see how crazy that Nebuchadnezzar is. This furnace of blazing fire. How quickly they'll be cast into it without any questions asked. We see that coming here based on how that's talked about. You guys, I don't know, you maybe have looked into this before, but my understanding is probably made out of metal. It's probably shaped like a beehive. They would drop the people in from the top, and then there was like a viewing deck off to the side where they could watch the people burn or roast marshmallows, however they wanted to do it. But it was an extremely extreme. It was extreme what he was doing with this, and so we kind of we don't quite see what's going to happen to them quite yet, but we get a preview of how crazy that he is.
I do have a
Yeah.
footnote that said it was common. He had already killed Zedekiah and Ahab in the same fashion, and it could have been set up to smelt all the gold. Although I think it was just gold laid. It wasn't solid.
The statue?
Statue.
That was used for the statue?
Yeah, to smelt the gold.
It'd have to be something like that to be able to be that hot to do it. Yeah, that makes
Industrial
sense.
use.
Nope, I thought I was in the right. Oops. Let's go to Deuteronomy 4:20 real quick. Some people would look at the fiery furnace as similar to the furnace of Egypt that the people of Israel were coming out of. So another testing ground. So, see you guys. But the Lord has taken you, brought you out of the iron furnace from Egypt to be a people for his own possession as today. So again, there's some symbolism here with this being a testing ground, kind of like the people of Egypt were. So Nebuchadnezzar would want to use this, of course, for torture, but the reader who's probably reading this for the first time would see this as and a lot of this as a testing ground for people who are faithful to God. The people of Israel were very familiar with heroic stories. Like Abraham being thrown into Nimrod's furnace. So he would have been not Neo-Babylon, where we are now, but the original Babylon, for disparaging Babylonian idols. This is actually a story that's been recorded in a Jewish text, again, showing a test by fire. So there's a lot of these sort of tests. It's not out of the ordinary. We're only seeing just a few stories in Daniel of what happens to the people who are in the dispersion during this time of exile, and even after that time of the exile, even post-exile. So it's something that gives us a sense of, if you think about all the other testing, we recently did the story of Esther in Sunday school 2 weeks ago, and how the Jewish people were put under a test again, and then Esther and Mordecai and his group was able to get through that, right? There's other stories that we'll see too that happen here that's just is consistent with the testing of the Jewish people. Let's stop there tonight, and we'll start at 8 and finish up chapter 3 next week, because my DoorDasher is apparently about to arrive. Sorry.
DoorDash. You bring enough for everybody?
It's going to the house, so sorry, I didn't.
Sharing is caring.
It is. And I care, but I'm not sharing.